City Skylines 2 has landed, but it's got big city-sized shoes to fill, with the 8-year-old original being one of the most beloved city builders out there. Is it fair to compare a game that has countless expansions and user-made mods against a fresh-born baby game? Probably not, but it's the comparison we have to make. And City Skylines 2 does feel like a worthy follow-up that nails so much about what makes for a great city builder, but it also fails at a whole bunch of stuff. So here's my list of what City Skylines 2 nails and fails. Let's get the big fail out of the way. The performance is what us Aussies would call dog shit. Doesn't matter if you're packing a top-of-the-line GPU paired with the latest CPU, City Skylines 2 runs terribly, with the only way to get decent frame rates being to drop the graphics down to ugly mode and set the resolution to 1920 by 1080. What are we, some kind of animal stuck back in 2010? And even then, on my pretty solid rig, it still stutters worse than I do whenever I have to do any kind of public speaking. The developers are confident they'll get it fixed up and purring like a kitten eventually, but for now, she's rough. Trying to build nice interchanges and roads that didn't look like some weird blobby mess was challenging to say the least in the original, but City Skylines 2 makes road building an absolute dream. Now you can easily add slip lanes, turning lanes, stack roads, place roundabouts, draw roads through other roads, quickly make big grids, and just generally put roads together however you want, and you can even wiggle them around a little. Also, thanks to the game's excellent automatic lane marking, it all looks right and just works. And the AI actually uses all the lanes now too. It's a traffic management miracle. I'm also a big fan of the fact that you can actually afford more than a handful of roads to start off. In the first game, building much more than a couple of blocks would bankrupt you, but here you can plan out a nice little town center before you get started. Speaking of traffic management, it's a big fail that push bikes aren't included at all. Cycling and cycling-friendly city design are huge factors in modern city planning, and not having them at all is like a stick getting flung right into my spokes at top speed. Some may also be a bit sad to see that traffic management here is pretty easy compared to the nightmare fuel that industry could unleash on you in the first game. While larger cities do still get traffic jams in badly designed areas, by and large a simple roundabout seems to fix most problematic junctions. And that's with the added challenge of people now crashing everywhere too. Personally though, I do think it's actually much better balanced here, but those craving the thrills of solving hair-pulling traffic chaos may find more to love in the original. Thanks to the addition of just a few more zoning options, especially in the residential area, with row housing, medium density, and mixed-use commercial and residential buildings, it's now so much easier to create satisfying and realistic blends of buildings. They've also nailed the scale of maps and buildings. Mountains now loom large over your city in much bigger default map areas, and where larger buildings in particular never felt right in the original, here giant utilities and special buildings take up a more realistic footprint that feels a lot more pleasing to my eye. High density skyscrapers especially now feel like imposing monoliths that require extra special placement consideration, just like they should. The options for those of us who enjoy zooming in and getting into the fine details though are sadly limited. Currently we can only place trees and bushes and draw paths, and we have to place each bush and tree either individually or with a big imprecise brush. Not having an inbuilt tool similar to the Propline mod feels like a missed opportunity. The lack of proper key walls hurt too, although the new cut and fill mechanic almost makes up for it, even if it can be very temperamental to use. I do also really miss the Park Life and Campus DLC features. These let you set up and design your very own parks and universities however you wanted, including amusement parks, which always very much tickled that part of my brain that loves Roller Coaster Tycoon. There was just a nice extra layer of depth and management that came with designing, leveling up, and evolving parks and campuses that is completely lacking here. Now everyone's university just looks exactly the same. And don't get me started on this sad excuse for a water park. There's also now just a lot of lovely little touches and welcome quality of life improvements. Personally, I love the new seasons and seeing the vibe of my city change as the leaves change colour in autumn and snow falls in winter. And speaking of the vibes, I gotta give a shout out to the music. Absolute tunes. But more importantly, they've made the basics of city building so much more enjoyable. Simply putting water and electricity automatically under roads makes it so much easier to grow your city out more naturally and not have to worry about connecting your disparate electricity blobs together. Then there's things like the new much cleaner, snappier node system for drawing out districts and industry areas, the ability to easily make new outside connections, There's better and more realistic distribution and demand on services, realistic parking needs, and of course the aforementioned much improved road building tools. It's just so much more enjoyable to build and design your city here, to the point where going back to the original is genuinely hard for me now. One thing I'm not so sure about is some of the balancing. It seems impossible to ever get on top of the infinite demand for low density residential, and no matter how much housing I seem to build, people still complain about high rent. And I also seem to need an insane amount of incinerators to stay on top of my city's garbage. These just feel a bit unbalanced at the moment to me. Or maybe they're bugged, because there's definitely a few crawling around, like businesses complaining about not having enough customers, even if they are literally swimming in customers. Meanwhile, only one of my post-sorting facilities seems to work at all, and some buildings seem to spawn in as giant, ominous, shiny black cubes, although they do look quite cool. But less cool is the fact I've also had more than a few crashes. That said, I have been enjoying the extra detail that feels like it's ticking away behind the scenes in the simulation. It's a little intangible, but it's there. I love tinkering with the more in-depth economy, with clear supply chains to improve, letting me buy or sell services as I need from my neighbours, and dealing with the more nuanced and varied needs of my citizens makes it so my city feels so much more like I'm managing and leading it with the choices that I make. This one is probably a very niche complaint, but it's disappointing to see the water physics are more or less unimproved on here, especially when it comes to beaches. Where are the waves? How am I supposed to build my Australian beach city with flat surf like this? One thing I do think they've nailed is the new progression system. Seeing and hearing that slow trickle of XP come in from people being happy and placing down roads and buildings is pure gaming satisfaction. But best of all is the freedom that comes from now being able to buy any map tile you like, so you can now set up separate little satellite cities and towns to make more natural use of the resources scattered around the map. Signature buildings also add in a few nice goals to strive for, bringing some good perks for your city if you can unlock them. And it's great that they're now functional buildings rather than just being tourist attractions. And I love that you can focus on what matters to you and your city by spending your development points on the things you care about. Mods have been the lifeblood and key to success of the first game, so it's a definite fail that they aren't here at launch. It's also slightly controversial that they've opted to ditch Steam Workshop support in favour of the Paradox Mods platform. But that does mean mods will be more readily shared across platforms and consoles, which is undeniably a win for console players, whenever they get the game that is. Perhaps the most important thing it nails though is that it has the potential for greatness. All the fundamentals of a great city builder are here, and with a few patches, mods and expansions, all those fails will eventually, hopefully, be things it nails. It's launched a bit rough and ready, feeling almost like an early access game. But the bones are definitely there, and even with its issues, I've been loving it, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the future.